The chamber smelled of bureaucracy and bad decisions. High Chancellor Virox of the Galactic Council drummed his elongated fingers against the polished obsidian table, his three eyes flicking between the other council members. The tension in the room was thick enough to smother a small moan. Across from him, Ambassador Gorlash, a gelatinous being that always looked perpetually anxious, because he was quivered. "Let's be clear," Virox said, his voice smooth, calculated. "The human prisoners must be disposed of efficiently, permanently. We can't allow them to become martyrs." A murmur of approval rippled through the chamber. The council was made up of representatives from a dozen species, all of whom had at some point suffered significant inconvenience from humanity. Whether it was their baffling ability to innovate under pressure, their unyielding stubbornness, or their tendency to turn every interstellar conflict into some sort of underdog revenge saga, humans were exhausting. "We agreed upon containment," Gorlash blubbered, a wobble of protest in his voice. "Executing prisoners is, well, it's barbaric. And historically speaking, humans tend to, overreact. They overreact to everything," snapped Minister Xylox, a reptilian bureaucrat who had once lost an entire fleet to a human general with one battleship and an unhealthy amount of explosives. "Remember the taxation incident? We imposed a minor trade tariff, and they started calling it tyranny. There were muttered curses. No one liked to talk about that. It had been embarrassing. This is different," Virox insisted, steepling his fingers. "They are a threat. You all saw the reports from the Battle of Telmir 5. They should have surrendered. Instead, they improvised." More shuddering at that word. Improvised. The humans had turned mining equipment into orbital artillery and a cargo hauler into an impromptu warship. "It should have been impossible. They never stop," growled Admiral Kex, a broad-shouldered warrior from a species known for their battlefield prowess. "They fight as if the universe owes them an apology. They don't fear us like they should. That is precisely why this must be done." Virox's voice was calm, unwavering. "We eliminate the prisoners. We show humanity there is no hope, no victory, only submission. Without their soldiers, their morale will break. They will surrender." The council nodded in grim agreement. Gorlash let out a distressed gurgle, but no one cared. A motion was passed. The fate of the human prisoners was sealed. The executions began the next planetary cycle. The prisoners, thousands of them, were marched onto a barren moon, their hands bound behind them, their faces set in expressions that weren't fear, but something colder, harder. A group of alien officers stood in formation, weapons calibrated, aiming at the kneeling captives. A council representative, a pompous avian species with too many feathers and not enough common sense, cleared his throat and prepared to read the formal charges. That was when Captain Elias Mercer, the highest-ranking human in the captured forces, sighed loudly. "Are we seriously doing this?" The alien officer hesitated. "Yes. You are to be executed for crimes against the Council." Right, Mercer said. "And just so I understand, our crime was what? Defending ourselves when you attacked us?" The officer bristled. "You defied lawful authority." Mercer chuckled. "You mean the same authority that unilaterally declared itself the rulers of the galaxy without asking anyone?" Another prisoner, a wiry woman with a busted lip, chimed in. "Yeah, I'm still waiting on that galactic census. Didn't get my ballot." A few of the alien soldiers shifted uncomfortably. They had been warned not to engage in conversation with humans. It never ended well. The officer scowled. "Enough. You will kneel and what?" Mercer interrupted, grinning. "You think this is going to scare humanity? That when they see you slaughtering us, they'll roll over and beg?" There was a beat of silence. The prisoners weren't pleading. They weren't even looking at their executioners with hatred. They were pitying them. The officer hesitated. "Let me tell you what's about to happen," Mercer said, his voice eerily calm. "You're going to kill us. Then, within a week, the first retaliation will hit. At first, it'll be strategic strikes, stations going dark, supply routes cut, ships vanishing. You'll think, manageable." His grin widened. "And then, Earth declares total war, and that's when you learn what fear really is. A faint murmur ran through the alien troops. The officer stiffened. Enough of this. Fire. And they did. The energy weapons hummed. The prisoners fell. The moon was silent once more. For 3 whole days, the Galactic Council celebrated. It was done. And then the footage leaked. It wasn't just the execution. No, that would have been bad enough. But some poor fool had also recorded the council meeting, the smug discussions, the callous laughter, the explicit order to exterminate. The message spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The humans weren't just dead. They were betrayed. And humanity, it turned out, had seen it all. On Earth, deep beneath the UDC headquarters, Supreme Commander Alexandra Vasquez watched the execution feed in silence. The room was deathly still. Around her, admirals, generals, and intelligence directors sat motionless. The footage ended. The screen went black. Vasquez exhaled slowly. How long until our fleets are in position? 72 hours, Supreme Commander. Make it 48, and prepare the announcement. The communications officer hesitated. What should we tell them? Vasquez stood, adjusting her uniform. Her voice was cold. Final. Tell them we tried to be civilized. Tell them we offered peace. She turned to the gathered leaders, her eyes burning with fury. And tell them we're done playing nice. The order was signed. The fleets mobilized. The war had begun. The war room of the United Defense Command was eerily quiet. A silence that crackled, electric, the kind that came before an executioner's blade fell. Supreme Commander Alexandra Vasquez stood at the head of the table, her expression carved from stone, her fingers drumming against the polished metal surface. The execution footage had played on every screen across Earth and its colonies. There had been no need for speeches, no grand declarations. The galaxy had made a choice. Humanity would respond accordingly. She took a slow breath. Status? Fleet Admiral Julian Pierce, a man whose face was permanently set to mildly unimpressed, leaned forward. First and second fleets are en route. Special operations teams have already infiltrated high-priority council facilities. The AI Warfare Division is standing by. Vasquez nodded. Timetable: 48 hours before we reach the first target. But Pierce allowed himself a dry smirk. They won't know we're there until it's too late. Across the table, Director Kenji Mori of the Cyber Warfare Division adjusted his glasses. We've already begun operations on the information front. The Council's military network has more holes than a mining freighter. We've been inside their systems for months. Their admirals are still debating whether or not they should be concerned about the executions. By the time they realize they're at war, they'll be reading about their fleets getting shredded in real time. Good, Vasquez said simply. And the message? A communications officer cleared his throat. It's ready for broadcast. Just waiting on your word. Vasquez's fingers stilled against the table. She stood, walking toward the center of the room where a camera hovered, waiting. The light blinked red. She exhaled. Then she spoke. To the so-called Galactic Council, she began, her voice quiet, lethal. You murdered our people in cold blood. You gave no quarter, no mercy. And now you expect diplomacy? She tilted her head. This is your only warning. There will be no negotiations. No peace talks. No surrender. We are coming. She leaned in slightly. You wanted to see what humanity was truly capable of? You will regret it. She motioned to cut the feed. The message was sent. The war had officially begun. The first strike came not as a fleet, but as a whisper. On the council world of Mixer Prime, home to one of the most fortified military command centers in the galaxy, security systems flickered. There was no explosion, no warning sirens, just a quiet click as every automated defense shut down. Inside the main command hub, a Mixari officer frowned at his screen. Why are the orbital cannons offline? That can't be right, another officer muttered. He tapped at his console. The screen displayed an ominous message in bright red text. Hello there. What in the void? The lights died. Every screen went black. Then a human voice, calm, pleasant, came over the speakers. Good evening, esteemed members of the Galactic Council. We've noticed some technical difficulties with your security grid. Not to worry. We've taken the liberty of fixing it. You're welcome. Panic erupted. Officers scrambled. Alarms blared. But before they could react, before they could even begin to process what was happening, something much worse followed. The planetary shields, the last defense against orbital bombardment, collapsed. Then came the drop pods, thousands of them, streaking through the sky like falling stars, hitting the ground with terrifying precision. The first wave of Terran operatives emerged, clad in advanced exosuits, weapons gleaming. Inside the command center, an officer's voice trembled. "Oh no!" And then the door exploded. The first human soldier through the breach, Captain Rourke, gave the room a pleasant smile. Knock knock. Gunfire erupted. Across the galaxy, the scenario repeated. Human fleets emerged from the blackness of space like ghosts. Entire Council battle groups disappeared into the void, their distress calls swallowed by the silence. Admiral Kex, the same reptilian strategist who had once scoffed at humanity, stood in the Grand War Council chamber, watching in horror as the reports came in. "They're everywhere," a trembling officer whispered. "We can't track their movements. They're ships, asterisk, they don't fight like normal fleet star. We can't predict them." Kex slammed a fist against the table. "Then stop trying to predict them. We need a counteroffensive." "We have nothing to counter with," another officer snapped. "Every fleet we've deployed has been shredded." It was true. Humanity's war doctrine was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. The Council had relied on overwhelming force, static defenses, predictability. The humans? They adapted. They outmaneuvered. They cheated. On the Council capital world, panic spread like wildfire. Civilians, once convinced of their superiority, now whispered of shadows in the sky, of fleets that came and went like phantoms, of stations that went dark in the night. And then came the bombings. One by one, the core Council worlds suffered precise, surgical devastation. Military outposts, weapons factories, supply lines, all gone in the blink of an eye. The Council tried to retaliate, sending fleets to intercept. But the moment they thought they had cornered a human battle group, it simply wasn't there anymore. Back in the UDC war room, Admiral Pierce leaned back in his chair, watching the chaos unfold across the galactic network. He sipped his coffee. "You know," he mused, "I don't think they expected this." Vasquez arched an eyebrow. "You think?" Pierce gestured at a screen where yet another Council fleet was getting obliterated. "We're running out of ships to shoot at. This is getting embarrassing." Director Mori smirked. "I'd almost feel bad for them." A pause. Then they all laughed. The war had only just begun, and humanity was just getting started. The fortress world of Zalthun had never fallen. It was the pride of the Galactic Council's defenses, an impenetrable bastion surrounded by layered energy shields, orbital artillery platforms, and enough firepower to reduce entire fleets to cosmic dust. It had withstood sieges for centuries, its defenses legendary, its garrison unshakable. Tonight, it burned. Admiral Kex stood in the primary command bunker, his claws digging into the armrest of his command throne. His usually pristine uniform was disheveled, his scales dull with stress. Holograms flickered around him, each one broadcasting a different horror. Planetary defenses offline, orbital fleets in full retreat, entire sectors of the capital city consumed in flames. "This is impossible," he muttered. "This is not happening." A junior officer, wide-eyed and trembling, turned toward him. "Sir, we've lost control of the planetary defense grid. They turned it against us, Kex's eyes snapped to the primary screen. It was true. The automated turrets that once safeguarded Zalthun were now firing on their own warships, their targeting systems overridden. He bared his fangs. "How?" A voice, smooth and entirely too human, crackled through the bunker speakers. "Hi there, Admiral. You're probably wondering how we got into your systems." "The answer?" "Easily," Kex snarled, his claws gouging the armrest. "Identify yourself." The voice chuckled. "You can call me Lieutenant Carter. I'd say it's a pleasure, but I think we both know that'd be a lie." Kex's tail lashed. "You think this is funny?" "A little," Carter admitted. "But what's really funny is that while we've been chatting, I've just triggered an override on your primary power grid. Kex barely had time to process the words before the entire bunker plunged into darkness. The emergency lights flickered on, casting the room in a dim red glow. "Whoops," Carter's voice came again. "Looks like your shields just went down. That's a shame." The Admiral surged to his feet. "Deploy the ground forces. We will not lose this planet." "See, you keep saying that," Carter mused. "But your troops are, occupied." As if on cue, a nearby explosion rattled the bunker. The sound of gunfire erupted from the corridors. Screams. The distinctive whump of human railguns. "How?" Kex whispered. A new voice cut in, gruff and laced with amusement. "Admiral Kex, this is Captain Rourke. We're here to formally accept your surrender." Kex's spines flared. "I will never surrender to humans." There was a brief pause. "That's cute," Rourke said. "Unfortunately, it's not really up to you." The blast doors blew inward. A squad of heavily armored human soldiers swept into the room, weapons raised. The council officers scrambled for their sidearms, but it was a futile effort. The humans moved like ghosts, precise and relentless. Kex reached for his own weapon, but before he could even aim, a boot collided with his chest, sending him sprawling onto the cold metal floor. Captain Rourke loomed over him, his helmet reflecting the dim red glow of the emergency lights. He crouched, resting an elbow on his knee. "So, Admiral," he said casually, "tell me, how does it feel knowing your impenetrable fortress fell in under a day?" Kex wheezed, his pride warring with a very real fear creeping into his bones. This war is madness." Rourke grinned. "Nah, executing our prisoners was madness. This is just the consequences." Behind them, another explosion rocked the city. The night sky was alive with streaks of fire as human warships descended through the burning atmosphere, dropping reinforcements with ruthless efficiency. "Zalthun is ours," Rourke continued, standing. "Your fleets are broken. Your command structure is in shambles. And this is just one of your strongholds. I really hope the rest of your council buddies are watching, because we're coming for them next." Kex gritted his teeth. "You can't possibly mean to." "Oh, we do," Rourke said, smiling. "And trust me, we're just getting warmed up." Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. The council's great bastions, once thought untouchable, fell one by one. On the industrial world of Vathiz 9, a massive council fleet mobilized to repel the human assault, only for their flagship to suddenly change course and ram directly into their command station. The humans hadn't even boarded it. The ship's AI had been hijacked hours before the battle even began. On the fortress moon of Carvox, council soldiers manned the walls, prepared for a brutal siege, only to find that the humans had already infiltrated their supply lines weeks prior. Half the garrison woke up to find their weapons missing, their commanders bound and gagged, and their own orbital defenses already targeting them. And on the Galactic Council's primary war station, High Chancellor Vyrock sat in frozen terror as a single message flashed across his personal comm screen. Knock knock. The Council had ruled the galaxy for centuries. Tonight they learned what it meant to fear. The Galactic Council's capital world, Zenith Prime, was the heart of their empire. A world of opulence and arrogance. It had never known war, never heard the scream of an air raid siren, never imagined a scenario where their mighty fleets would not protect them. Tonight, the sky was on fire. High Chancellor Vyrock stood at the balcony of the Grand Citadel, his four arms gripping the marble railing so tightly that his claws left deep gouges. His advisors were behind him, a panicked chorus of voices, but he barely heard them. His attention was locked on the horizon, where the first wave of human warships had breached the planetary defense grid. "They weren't supposed to get this far," he muttered. Grand Strategist Jirak, his chief military advisor, was nearly hyperventilating. "We must open negotiations. Surrender terms. Surely they will accept surrender." Vyrox turned slowly, his expression a mask of disbelief. "Are you mad? Do you think these creatures will accept a white flag after what we did? They warned us. We laughed at them." His voice dropped to a whisper. "We called them vermin." A deafening explosion in the distance rattled the Citadel's foundation. The advisors ducked, flinching like prey animals. Virox did not move. His gaze was drawn to the Grand Skyway, the massive bridge that connected the government district to the Planetary Defense Command. A column of fire had erupted from its center, sending chunks of debris plummeting into the city below. Then, from the smoke, they emerged. Drop pods slammed into the streets, sending shockwaves through the ground. They cracked open with a hiss of decompression, and from them poured the Terran strike teams, black armored figures moving in unison, weapons gleaming under the burning sky. The palace guards rushed to form a defensive line, but it was hopeless. The humans moved fast, too fast for the sluggish, overindulged security forces of a planet that had never known war. Blaster fire filled the air. The humans barely slowed. From his balcony, Virox watched in mounting horror as one of the towering bronze statues of a former chancellor, a symbol of the council's might, shuddered, tilted, then collapsed into the reflecting pools below, shattered beyond recognition. A moment later, the Citadel's main doors exploded. A squad of Terran shock troopers stormed in, their leader stepping forward with an almost leisurely gait. Captain Rourke removed his helmet and smirked. "Nice place you've got here." Virox straightened, forcing himself to retain some shred of dignity. "I will not be taken prisoner. If you intend to kill me, then do so." Rourke sighed, shaking his head. "See, that's the problem with you guys. You think this is about you." He gestured around them. "We're not here to make you martyrs, Chancellor. We're here to end this." Jirak, still shaking, stepped forward. "You," he swallowed hard. "You're here to dismantle the council." Rourke's smile widened. Bingo. The humans didn't waste time. The palace was secured. The remaining council members rounded up with ruthless efficiency. Some tried to fight. It didn't go well. Some tried to flee. It went worse. Within hours, the council's seat of power had fallen. Across the planet, the remaining defenses collapsed like a house of cards. The once proud council fleets, their admirals still reeling from their catastrophic defeats, made desperate attempts to flee into deep space. Some managed. Most didn't. From orbit, Admiral Pierce watched the last of the resistance crumble. His officers moved around him, confirming one report after another. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "It's over," he murmured. Supreme Commander Vasquez, standing beside him, folded her arms. "Not quite." Pierce arched an eyebrow. "Oh." She nodded toward the planet below. "We need a statement." A few hours later, across every remaining council world, a broadcast went live. Chancellor Virox, disarmed and standing before the ruined remains of his citadel, was flanked by Terran soldiers. His once grand robes were tattered, his face gaunt. His voice, when he spoke, was a shadow of its former grandeur. "The Galactic Council is no more." He swallowed. The words burned like acid. "Effective immediately, we surrender to the United Defense Command of Earth." The humans had won, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Galactic Council's throne world had been reduced to embers, its once proud banners now trampled beneath Terran boots. The old order was gone, shattered beyond recognition. In its place, something new had begun to rise. Captain Rourke stood on the balcony of what used to be the Grand Citadel, hands resting on the rail as he overlooked the city below. Smoke still curled from some of the buildings, but the worst of the fighting was over. Terran dropships buzzed through the sky, delivering relief supplies instead of warheads. He took a deep breath. The air still carried the scent of burning metal, but beneath it, he could detect something else, something he hadn't smelled since landing. Hope! Behind him, the heavy doors creaked open. "Thought I'd find you here," Admiral Pierce said, stepping out onto the balcony. He looked just as exhausted as Rourke felt, his uniform streaked with dust and plasma burns. Rourke smirked. "Can't beat the view. I get why these guys like ruling from up here." He gestured toward the horizon. "Big chair, big speeches, bigger egos." Pierce grunted. "Yeah, well, none of them are making speeches anymore." Rourke turned to face him. "So, what's the verdict?" Pierce exhaled. "We're calling it. The war's officially over. Every major council world has surrendered. The few holdouts left are either running scared or too busy surrendering to the first human they see." Rourke chuckled. "I can't blame them. Our first impression wasn't exactly diplomatic. Pierce shook his head. No, it wasn't. And now we have to figure out what the hell comes next. That was the real problem, wasn't it? It was easy to win a war. It was infinitely harder to fix what came after. Pierce continued. Command's already drafting a new governing structure. They don't want another empire, but we do need stability. We're calling it the Unified Galactic Administration. Rourke wrinkled his nose. That's a terrible name. Yeah, will you come up with something better? How about humans own everything now? You're welcome. Pierce sighed. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. The door opened again, and Lieutenant Carter strode in, a data slate in hand. She had a grin on her face, never a good sign. Bad news first or worse news first? She asked. Rourke pinched the bridge of his nose. Give me the bad news. She held up the slate. So, it turns out the Galactic Council kept really detailed records on everyone they ever pissed off. And by everyone, I mean everyone, smugglers, exiled warlords, entire species they tried to wipe out. Now that the Council's gone, a lot of those folks are seeing an opportunity to settle old scores. Pierce groaned. Fantastic. And the worst news? Carter grinned. Some of them want to talk to us first. Rourke exchanged a glance with Pierce. Talk? As in? As in, hi, humans, nice work burning the galaxy down. Want to team up? There was a pause. Rourke considered it. Pierce groaned. Oh no. I know that look. Rourke shrugged. What? I'm just saying it wouldn't hurt to hear them out. Pierce pinched the bridge of his nose. You do realize that if we play this wrong, we could end up fighting a whole new war before we even finish cleaning up this one, right? Rourke grinned. Sure, but if we play it right, we don't just win the war, we win the peace. Pierce sighed, but there was a small, reluctant smile on his face. You really never stop, do you? Rourke stretched, cracking his knuckles. What can I say? We didn't come this far just to stop at the finish line. Carter tapped the slate. So, I'll tell them we're open to negotiations. Rourke clapped her on the shoulder. Tell them humanity's here to talk. He turned back to the city, watching as the first hints of dawn began to break through the smoke. The war was over. Now, the real work began.